John Wood Sr., he was in the Marines. Can you tell us a little something, Mr. Wood, there about what happened?
I don't have been in Perl Harbor a week when the Japs attacked. I was in the 4th Defense Battalion, and we had just arrived on December the 1st. We come from Guantanamo Bay, and we thought we were en route to Wake Island because we crated up our rifles before we left Cuba, and they were still stored when the Japs attacked on the 7th, but we got to Perl Harbor on December the 1st, and then we had been there a week on the 7th when the morning when the attack. We didn't know what was taking place at first. Everybody thought some other branch of the service was having maneuvers. And I had just come from breakfast that morning, and I was in my tent, and then I heard some of the boys that were coming after I had got back to the tent, and they were talking about seeing anti-aircraft fire and seeing some planes. And everybody went out and started looking up, and I could see some planes coming down, following the coastlines, the coast scene from between Honolulu and Perl Harbor, and then they were flying at a high altitude, and then started diving, and you see the anti-aircraft fire around them, and I saw one that got hit, and it was just a ball of fire. So I decided then that it was a little more than maneuvers. It was too realistic just to be to not be the real thing. But didn't any of the Jap planes really bomb us or strafe us, but one circled the camp area, and we could see the big red ball on the wing of the plane. And we knew then that it was, we'd already decided it was the real thing. But it circled the camp, flew on off in the direction of Honolulu, and some of the boys, they all ran down to the storage tents, and they broke out the rifles and threw everybody a rifle and told them to fire on any plane that came in range. But the plane really wasn't in range, close enough for us to be effective, but some of the boys were still firing at it. They didn't hit the plane, it flew on off. But the second wave, I guess it was, of the planes, when they got started coming over, somebody started firing out over our heads. I don't know where it was coming from, but just down in the harbor areas, off of some of the ships or Hickam Field, I guess. But anyway, it wasn't any Jap planes anywhere close to us, but that anti-aircraft fire was going off right over our heads, and there was a mess hall under construction that had concrete footing poured in. It was framed up, had a roof over it, and we all ran over there and jumped over in it, and got her laid down there on the ground right close to that concrete footing. We had our hands over our heads, and we didn't know if they were going to ever quit firing. It didn't seem like they were going to. And that wasn't Jap fire. It was our fire. And finally they did quit, and or started firing in another direction, maybe. But there's a boy, his head is about 10 or 12 inches, I guess, from mine. And we both got up enough nerve to raise up and start looking around. And he didn't say anything to me, and I didn't say anything to him. But his face is white as those tablecloths out there. And I just wondered to myself if my face was as white as his was. But that was what the thing that was the most uneasy moment for us. Up there where we were, it was at a camp it was under construction between Perl Harbor and Honolulu. But I only spent 19 days at Perl Harbor. Part of the 4th Defense left about a week later, and they started at Wake Island. And 4 or 5 days in after they left, there's another group of us, but left Perl Harbor on the 19th of December. And we went to Midway, and we landed at Midway on Christmas Eve morning. And it started unloading ships, so when we got there and spent Christmas Day still unloading the ship, I was at an ammunition dump back out on the backside of the island, and they were hauling the 5 and 7-inch service charges of powder, and we was unloading the trucks, and that's what I spent Christmas Day doing. And I think we got a bologna and cheese sandwich, apple and orange. That was our Christmas dinner that day. And I joined the 6th Defense when I went to Midway, and I spent 15 months on Midway. I was there on June the 4th, and when the Japs attacked Midway. And Midway it turned out a whole lot better for us than Perl Harbor did, because they didn't slip up on us at Midway. We knew they were coming, and I felt a whole lot better about what happened at Midway than I did Perl Harbor. But I finally went back to the States in April '43, and I had a 30-day leave, and then I checked in at Camp June in North Carolina. And incidentally, North Carolina is my home state. That's where I was born and raised. But I spent 2 years at Camp June, and then my 4-year enlistment was up in April '45. And I extended for 2 years. I thought that the way the war was going on, it would last that much longer anyway. They got a little extra money for it extended. But it ended in about 6 months. But in the meantime, shortly after I extended, they sent me back to Perl Harbor. And I hadn't been there too long. I don't guess for more than 2 or 3 months maybe. The war ended, and I still had a year and a half to do after it ended because of my 2-year extension. But I went to Guam and spent most of my time, my remaining time at Guam, and up on Pagan Island. Part of the time too, we built a naval gunfire range out there, and I was in the communications outfit that would go to the island, and when they were when the destroyers would come up to fire, and we would get in communication with them and designate targets for them to fire on. But they were gunfire. And that's what I did the last year and a half that I was in the service. But I got out in April, in May of 27, and I wound up with a little over 6 years in the service. And when I did get out, I went to Louisville, school there for a couple of years, nearly 2 years, and then I took a job in a radio station in Glasgow, and that's where I wound up. And I still live there. I worked in broadcasting for about 40 years. Well, I got married after I went to Kentucky too, and we had 3 children. My wife died in 1997, but I made my home in Glasgow, and I spent, I guess, about 60 years there now. A lot longer than I lived in North Carolina even, but I guess since I am here in Kentucky, my roots probably deeper now than they were in North Carolina, so get here for the rest of my days, I guess. November, and I got a daughter here with me tonight that was born on my birthday on November the 20th, and she, I know that was a birthday present that it's a one-time affair. It'll never get that another.
That was the best birthday present a guy could give, was a daughter like that, huh? That was the best birthday present a guy could give, was a daughter like that.
Yeah, I don't want to do it out here now.
There you go. There you go. Miss Candace Steen, will you please stand up? There you go. Happy birthday. That's Mr. Wood's daughter. He has a son here, daughter-in-law, and another daughter down in Tennessee, I believe. And Mr. Edwards' son's here also. And now,
I got one other daughter too, but
she's down in Nashville, isn't she? Yeah. Now we've heard from the Navy, we've heard from the Marines. How about let's bring the Army into it? This is Mr. Herman Horn. He was in the Army.
Perl Harbor with the gas attack, and I was there for 2 terms. I've been president of Perl Harbor survivor for 2 terms over the years, and it's a good organization. This is a good organization here at this church, people here to put this program on. It's something else. I said I had something else, but I'm glad what it was.
Tell us something about the war, when you was over the war.
Yeah, I've got my daughter got it here. I had an whole album of pictures of Perl Harbor, of the planes, ships, and I got one picture of a Japanese pilot up in the air with a big grin on his face. Then he left up there, and I don't know that. There's all things like that. I get mixed up sometimes, but I've had a whole lot of experiences with the Perl Harbor survivors, and it's a wonderful organization.
If I'm not mistaken, you do have a picture of thank you very, very much. And Mr. Hornsdaughter is here also. Cindy, would you stand up, Cindy? Eddie, you just well stand up too. You and Brenda. That's Mr. Wood's son and daughter-in-law. It's a fine group of guys. Oh, Jimmy, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Jimmy. That's Mr. Andrews' son. Sorry. Fine group of guys. It's a fine organization here. This is a wonderful, Labor of Love is a wonderful thing also. They ain't even here. There's a bunch of the Smiths. Go ahead. Y'all all stand up. The Smiths, Crowds, we're all connected. Bakers. This is Linda and Robert Baker and the sons and daughters. We're all connected. And it's just a wonderful thing here, folks. A wonderful thing you're doing. John, you got anything?
People forget these guys are full of stories. I mean, before the war and after, there was a whole war they fought. Also the Great Depression was before. Some of these guys may have been drafted or just joined because, just wanted a hot meal. I actually got a chance to sit down with Ricky's dad, my grandfather, and write down his life story. The books are over there if anybody's interested, but it's probably the best thing I've ever done in my life. It's one of the hardest things, to take his life stories and put it down in a book. He did get cancer, but they trace it back to USS Lowell, but it's probably one thing I got right in life is doing that. So if anybody's interested, his book over there on his life, it's a good book. Not because I wrote it, just because it's a life story.
It is a good book.
Don't feel guilty if you don't buy it, because I'll eat, maybe not a lot. But
and I will tell you this, when he was writing the book, he would call me a lot of times and he would say, "Did you know this was so-and-so? Did you know this happened? Did you know this was true?" I said, "Well, yeah." He said, "Well, but it's true." I said, "Well, John, your grandpa ain't gonna lie to you. He said, "Well, I thought he might have just got confused." I said, "No, I researched it. It's true." I said, "Yeah, I know."
Some of these guys, their memories are just unbelievable. And it's 70 years ago, and they're getting it right, just down to a T. No, like I said, there's nothing you ever forget.
And so if it's not forgotten, it might not ever happen again. I hope it don't.
I mean, there's the bigger things, there are also the little small details that went on. I mean, that's what, like my grandpa was talking about putting a captain in the freezer that died on the ship to get him back home to New York. I mean, just put him in the freezer, I mean, there's a million stories like that. First guy that died on the EC die was from a hazing accident. They lit his hula skirt or with a cigarette. Just 1,000 stories like that. Then you got the bigger ones like Perl Harbor. And these guys are at Midway as well, it's a well-known battle. I mean, it's a whole war you can talk about.
Well, if you ever see a burial at sea, it's just something you'll never forget. You go to a funeral home, you have a burial in the graveyard. These guys are lined up on the side of the ship. They dip them over the side, and they're going down in the ocean. And it's something that you never will forget. Or you see one of your buddies right next to you get his head blown off. There's things like that you never can forget. And especially when you're 17, 18 years old. If they ever fight another war, they ought to make a rule that they use old people instead it takes a young person to do something like that. But I just hope and pray that it never happens again. Because it's just something that happened. You can't forget it, no matter how old you get, no matter how much you try, you don't forget it. And you don't forget a shipmate or a buddy. I mean, I remember guys back when I was 17 years old that was on my gun crew. They was closer than family. I mean, you live with these guys night and day, you stay in watches with them, you see them get shot. It's just something you never forget, never will forget. But I hope Perl Harbor is never forgotten, and I hope it never happens again. We keep our country strong enough so it won't happen.
6 weeks cruise to China and Japan when I was on Guam, and I was on the cruiser to Topeka, and we came out of Shanghai. They had 2 out of Shanghai. They had a barrel at sea. It's a chief petty officer, they said, had died, and they were burying him at sea, and you put him on that slide that he said in that canvas bag. They just released it and made it slide off into the water in the Marine firing squad fired that 21-gun salute there during the ceremony. And you're right, you don't get it seeing something like that. In fact, the ones that were killed on Midway were buried at sea. And the BT boats took the bodies out and put them in, they had 40-pound weights in those bags, and as the ship came in shortly after the burial and reported over the jig line that the remains of a burial party was still floating beyond the reef out in the open water. So something like that is still stays with you. You don't forget it, something like that either. So that happened that midway. The bodies that were buried, that were killed, that were buried at sea. They weren't brought back to burial at home like some of the other bodies that were returned to home, to their native states and buried like some of them were. There's a body in up at the cemetery in Kentucky, and he was one of the boys that kept raising the flag on the Iwo Jima. That he was killed, he never got out alive, but his body was brought back to Kentucky after the war, and he's buried in Giffords County, Fleming County, I believe it is. He was one of the 7 that raised the flag on Suribachi. His name was Ashley, I believe is his last name.
Well, Mr. Horn, have you got anything else you'd like to say? Okay. Yeah, has anybody got any questions you'd like to ask any of them? Or? I see one back there, I think. These lights are bright.
Was any of them ever wounded while they were in the service?
Were any of you ever wounded while you were in the service?
I would.
Was you ever wounded while you was in the service?
No.
No.
Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima before I got home.
Saipan?
Tinian and Iwo Jima.
Before you came home?
I got home in 1945.
1945. Anybody else got any questions you'd like to ask them? None would be. You're 94 years old. He's a pup, ain't he? How old are you, Mr. Wood?
93.
Be 94 November the 20th?
Next month.
November the 20th, yeah. And Jim, you're 91, right?
I'm 91, I got to put up with these old men.